12 years ago, I was just 19-year-old girl, caught between the predictable routine of my small village life and the whisper of something more, something unknown. Every afternoon, after my classes ended, I would rush to the little cafe where I worked, tying my apron neatly around my waist and pulling my hair back into a ponytail before stepping behind the counter. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sweet aroma of pastries filled the air, a warm, comforting reminder of the life I had always known. The cafe was a small, cozy place, nestled between the town's bookstore and the flower shop, where the same faces walked in and out every day. The elderly women who gossiped over their afternoon tea, the tired shopkeepers looking for a moment of respite, the students who huddled in the corner, scribbling notes while sipping on cheap espressos. All of them formed the heartbeat of my world. But among them was one face that stood out, one presence that disrupted the monotony of my days with the quiet force of a storm waiting to break. His name was Lucas. Lucas was everything I was not. Confident, older, unbothered by the constraints of small-town expectations. He was the kind of man who didn't have to try to draw attention. He simply existed, and the world adjusted itself around him. He owned the motorcycle shop on the other side of town, a business that thrived despite the whispers about his recklessness, his tendency to leave a trail of broken hearts behind him. With his dark hair always slightly tousled, his leather jacket slung carelessly over his shoulder, and the sharp, knowing curve of his smile, he was the kind of person who didn't just move through life, he devoured it. Every evening, just as the sun dipped below the rooftops, he would walk into the cafe, taking his usual seat at table number 5, the one by the window. He never needed to order. He always drank his coffee black, no sugar, no milk. It was a small thing, but it fascinated me, the simplicity of it, the way he never hesitated in what he wanted. And then there was the way he looked at me, not just in passing, but with a lingering gaze that made my stomach tighten and my thoughts scatter. At first, I told myself it was nothing. A man like Lucas had no reason to notice a girl like me, a girl who had spent her entire life within the same 4 streets, who had never been anywhere, never done anything extraordinary. But then, one evening, he spoke to me. "Best coffee in town," he said, his voice smooth, casual, as if he hadn't just sent my heart into a frantic rhythm. He leaned slightly against the counter, watching me with an amused glint in his eyes, as if he knew exactly what effect he had on me. I forced myself to smile, to say something witty, something that would make me seem less like a nervous child and more like someone who belonged in his world. But all I managed was a quiet, breathless thanks. It was embarrassing, really, how easily he unraveled me with just a few words. My father didn't trust him. "That boy thinks he's better than everyone else," he would mutter whenever Lucas's name came up in conversation. My older sister, Maria, was even more direct. "He's bad news," she warned me one evening as we washed dishes in the cramped kitchen of our family home. "He dates girls for 2 weeks, maybe 3 if they're lucky, and then he moves on. You're not special, no matter how much he makes you feel like you are." I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that she didn't know him like I did, but the truth was, I barely knew him at all. Still, there was something about Lucas that made it impossible to stay away, a gravitational pull that had nothing to do with logic or reason. So when he asked for my number one evening, I gave it to him without hesitation. My hands trembled as I scribbled it onto a napkin, pressing the ink deep into the paper as if that would somehow make it more real. That night, my phone rang, and for the first time, I heard Lucas's voice outside of the cafe. We talked for hours, long past midnight, our words stretching between us like an invisible thread, binding me to him in ways I didn't fully understand yet. He told me about the places he had been, the cities he had seen, the towering skyscrapers of New York, the golden beaches of California, the neon lights of Tokyo. I listened, captivated, my mind painting vivid pictures of a world I had never known. He asked about my dreams, what I wanted to do beyond the cafe, beyond the village, and for the first time, I allowed myself to imagine something more. A week later, he invited me to a music festival in the next town, a place far enough that it felt like stepping into another life. I knew my parents would never allow it, so I lied. It was a small lie, I told myself, just a harmless excuse. I would tell them I was staying at my friend Sophia's house for the night. Sophia agreed to cover for me, though she hesitated before sending a final message. Be careful. I brushed it off, too caught up in the thrill of something new, something exhilarating. The festival was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Bright lights, pulsing music, crowds that moved like waves, their laughter and voices merging into a chaotic, intoxicating symphony. Lucas held my hand as we weaved through the sea of people, his grip steady, possessive. Stick with me, he murmured against my ear, his breath warm against my skin. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if it was excitement or nerves that made my heart pound so wildly. The night unfolded in a blur of neon lights and music that vibrated through my bones, of Lucas's hand on the small of my back, his voice a steady anchor in the chaos. As the festival wound down, Lucas turned to me, his eyes gleaming under the flickering lights. Let's go to my family's cabin by the lake, he said, his voice low, inviting. It's too late to drive back now. We can watch the sunrise together. I hesitated. My parents expected me home in the morning, but the thought of being alone with Lucas, away from the noise, under the stars, it was too tempting. I sent Sophia a quick message. Cover for me. She replied almost instantly. Are you sure? I didn't answer. The cabin was nestled deep within the woods, small but cozy, with a fireplace that crackled softly as Lucas lit a fire. The room smelled of cedar and something faintly metallic, something I couldn't quite place. We sat on the couch, the heat from the flames casting flickering shadows across the walls. Lucas draped an arm around me, his fingers trailing idly along my shoulder. I've liked you since the first time I saw you, he murmured, his lips so close to mine that I could feel every word. My breath hitched as he leaned in, his mouth meeting mine in a kiss that was soft at first, then deeper, more insistent. My heart raced, my body frozen between wanting and uncertainty. Then something shifted. His hands moved too quickly, too urgently, tugging at the fabric of my dress. I pulled away. Lucas, stop. I'm not ready. His expression darkened, his grip tightening for a brief second before he let go. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Don't be such a child, he muttered. Why did you come here if you didn't want this? I swallowed hard, my stomach twisting. I came because I wanted to be with you, to talk, to watch the sunrise. Lucas let out a humorless laugh. Talking and sunrises? That's not why people come to cabins. I shook my head, suddenly feeling unbearably small in the dim light. I just thought, "You thought what?" he interrupted, his voice sharp. "That we'd sit here and hold hands like kids?" He stood abruptly, grabbing his keys. "If you want to act like a child, I'll treat you like one." And then he was gone. That was just the first half of the journey, the painful awakening that led to transformation. But what came next? The city, the struggles, the new beginnings, and the unexpected love that proved not all hearts break the same way. This is where the story truly deepens, where pain gives way to resilience, and where love becomes something real, not just a fleeting promise, but a foundation strong enough to last a lifetime. When I arrived in the city, everything felt overwhelming. The streets were alive with a rhythm so different from the quiet village I had known all my life. The towering buildings, the ceaseless hum of cars, and the sheer number of people moving in every direction. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. I had rented a tiny room, barely big enough for a bed and a small desk, but it was mine, and that was enough. My roommate, Lily, was unlike anyone I had met before. She had bright blue hair, tattoos that told stories across her skin, and a confidence that made me envious. She had lived in the city for years and took me under her wing, guiding me through the subway system, introducing me to hole-in-the-wall cafes, and teaching me how to navigate the chaos without losing myself. At university, I threw myself into my studies, burying myself in literature, escaping into worlds created by words while trying to craft my own. I worked part-time at a bookstore to afford my expenses, and though the pay was meager, I loved being surrounded by books. Each spine held a different story, each page an invitation into someone else's imagination. The smell of ink and paper became a comfort to me, reminding me that stories had power, that they could shape, heal, and redefine a person. But despite my new life, there were nights when the loneliness crept in, when I thought of home, my parents, and even Lucas. Not because I missed him, but because the wound he had left still ached in moments of doubt. Then, one evening, after a long shift at the bookstore, I stood under the awning, watching as the rain poured down in silver sheets. People rushed past with umbrellas, disappearing into the blur of headlights and reflections on wet pavement. I had forgotten mine at home, and I debated making a run for it when a voice beside me said, "Need some help?" I turned to see a man holding a large green umbrella. His eyes were kind, his smile gentle, and his sweater, already dotted with rain, made him look almost endearingly unprepared for the storm himself. "I see you at the bookstore sometimes," he added, as if to reassure me that he wasn't a stranger, just someone who had noticed me from a distance. His name was Thomas. He worked at the music store across the street, teaching piano and selling instruments. There was something safe about him, something that didn't make me want to shrink away. Still, my past made me hesitate. After Lucas, I had learned to be cautious, to measure my trust carefully. But Thomas didn't push. He simply walked with me to the subway, making conversation, sharing small glimpses into his life without expecting anything in return. At the station, before we parted ways, he asked if I liked coffee. "I prefer tea," I admitted, expecting him to lose interest. Instead, he grinned. "Tea works too. There's a great shop near the bookstore." And just like that, a door I didn't even realize had been closed slowly began to open. We met on a Wednesday, and he was already at the tea shop when I arrived, sitting at a table by the window with 2 teapots in front of him. "I didn't know what kind you liked, so I got both green and black," he said, and that small consideration touched me more than I expected. We talked for hours about books and music, about our dreams and childhoods. He told me he had moved to the city 3 years ago, that he wanted to compose his own music one day, that each piece told a story just like books did. When he asked about my dreams, I hesitated, unaccustomed to being asked. But slowly, I told him. I wanted to teach, to write, to inspire others with stories the way books had always inspired me. "Will you show me your writing someday?" he asked. "They're not very good," I admitted. "I'd still like to read them," he said, and I realized then how different he was from anyone I had known before. As the weeks passed, Thomas became a steady presence in my life. We explored the city together, visited museums, went to concerts where he introduced me to classical music, and wandered through bookshops where I introduced him to my favorite authors. Unlike Lucas, he never rushed anything. When he held my hand for the first time, he asked if it was okay. When he kissed me, it was gentle, never demanding more than I was ready to give. It was a love that grew not out of fiery intensity, but out of kindness, patience, and trust. Then, one day, he didn't show up for our usual meeting. He didn't call, didn't message. I waited for an hour, my mind spiraling into doubt. Had I misjudged him? Had he grown bored? 3 days passed with no word, and when I went to the music store, his colleague told me he wasn't working that week, but offered no further explanation. My heart sank, memories of past disappointments creeping in. Just when I had begun to trust again, was I being abandoned once more? A week later, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Thomas stood there, looking exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice heavy. "My mother had a stroke. I had to leave immediately. There was no time to tell you, and the hospital had no phone signal." Relief washed over me. He hadn't disappeared without reason. He had been dealing with something real, something painful. "Is she okay?" I asked. "She will be," he said, though his eyes held the weight of worry. Then, after a long pause, he added, "While I was away, I realized something." "What?" I asked. He took a deep breath. "I love you." Those 3 words had once terrified me. The last time I thought someone loved me, I ended up walking alone in the dark. But Thomas was not Lucas. He had shown me, day by day, what real love looked like. Not a reckless thrill, but a steady presence, a gentle warmth that never demanded but always gave. "You don't have to say it back," he said. "I just wanted you to know." But I did love him, not in the way I had once mistaken love to be, not the heart-racing, mind-clouding infatuation, but something deeper, truer. "I love you too," I said, and in that moment, I knew that this time, love wasn't going to leave me stranded in the dark. Years passed. Thomas and I finished university. I became a teacher. He opened a small music school. We moved in together, filling our home with books and music. 2 years later, he proposed at a concert in the park during my favorite composer's final piece. "Maya," he said, "you brought words to my music. Will you marry me?" Through happy tears, I said yes. We married in a garden, surrounded by friends and family. My parents came from the village. Thomas's mother, now in a wheelchair, smiled proudly. Lily, still with blue hair, was my maid of honor. And now, as I sit here writing this, I am 31, married for 5 years, and expecting our first child. When I told Thomas, he composed a piece on the piano. "I wrote this for our baby," he said. "He or she will grow up surrounded by stories and songs." Sometimes I think about Lucas. My sister told me he still lives in the village. His motorcycle shop failed, and he drinks too much. I don't wish him harm. I hope he finds peace. But without that painful night, I might never have left. I might never have met Thomas. I might never have found the life I was meant to have. If you're going through something difficult, know this: pain is temporary. Storms pass. The right people will come when you're ready. Trust yourself. Be patient. One day, you'll look back and realize that even the darkest nights led you to the light.